Hey, it's Allie Edwards, and welcome back to another episode of Craft the Story. This week we are going to talk about getting started. If this is your first time scrapbooking, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about how do you return to scrapbooking. If maybe it's something that you did at some point in the past and you let it go for whatever reason, I want to wholeheartedly welcome you back, and I want to talk about some ideas for getting started today. All right, so one of the questions that I am often asked is, how do I get started? And for me, as someone who has been doing this now for almost 20 years, it's actually really hard for me to think back to what it was like in the beginning. And sometimes it's hard for me to gather up all of my thoughts to talk about where to start. One of the key things with getting started with scrapbooking, whether you are starting for the first time or whether you are returning, is that I want to encourage you to start with stories about right now. Sometimes when people are first getting started, they feel like they have to go back in and they need to tell all of the past stories before they can tell stories about today. You might be thinking of, your kids are in their 20s and you want to go back and you want to tell the story of their life from the beginning, which is awesome, and that's something that you can do. But what I really encourage people to do when they're first starting out is to start with a story about right now. Often we're pretty motivated to tell stories about right now. We probably have access to images from right now. We are awake and alive and aware, right, of what's happening in our own lives. So the story's already inside of us. The story is already a living thing because we are living things. For today's video, I want to talk about two different approaches. One is a super simple, let's start right here. This is probably the easiest way to begin scrapbooking or to return to scrapbooking. And then we'll talk about another option that it's kind of a step up and that's gonna look a little bit more like the kinds of projects and pages that I'm creating now. Now, I do a mixture of things inside page protectors, outside page protectors. I do a variety of sizes. I'm very loose with all of that. But you can be a scrapbooker and you can document your stories without having to get uber creative or do things that are that feel like they're work. Telling your story in a really simple way is absolutely possible, and it is absolutely still a really beautiful option. So let's talk about what I have on the table here, and then we'll talk a little bit about the story that I'm going to tell and how I'm going to do it in a few different ways. I wanted to start off just with talking a little bit about albums. If you've watched my previous videos, you've seen me talk about my philosophy related to albums. We have new albums in the shop now. One of them includes this really pretty light gray linen 9x12 if you're looking for that, and I'm going to start this one out as the kind of holding place for my 2021 stories. We also have 6x8 album options. This is a newer one that is in there. This is a charcoal cloth one. This is great if you are just getting started and maybe you feel intimidated by the bigger size. When you get an album like this, it will come with some page protectors inside, and one of my favorite page protectors is one that has two 4x6 pockets, and that's the story that I'm going to show you today would fit in that 4x6 pocket page. That will be one example, and then the other example I'm going to show you is going to go into the larger album. You're also going to see me work on my computer a little bit. I am including some video related to that to show you how I open Photos, the Photos app on my computer, how I move things into Photoshop. I talk a little bit about why I use that. There are lots of other program options for you as well, but you'll see a little bit of both of those. The other thing I have out here on my table is something that we offered new for the first time last year, and it's called Stories by the Year, and it comes in this cute little box, and then on the inside are tons of cards. I actually have one of the sample versions from when we were looking at it when it came back from the manufacturer, but this set includes 3x4 and 4x6 cards in multiples. So if you are doing weekly documenting, you might really love this because it actually has a bunch, more than 52, right? this week cards where you can just put in the title. So if you're doing Project Life, this is great for that. You can also just use the backs of these cards. You can use these to just tell the story of one week. You don't have to use it in a, continual Project Life format. But the other things that are in here are 4x6 and 3x4 cards. And so these, starting with cards and printing your photos through a developer is a really easy way to get started. If you don't want to buy your own printer, which I highly suggest that you consider just for the flexibility, and the prints that come out, especially on the Epson PictureMate PM400 printer that I have, come out really awesome. So one of the simplest ways, let's just start with the simplest way, and then we'll meet up with the other options that are available to you after that. So in a 6x8 album that comes with a variety of page protectors, like I said, one of the options there is the 2-up 4x6. So the story that I am sharing with you guys today, and the story that I'm working to create a couple projects or what project in multiple sizes, just so you can see the example, is a photo that a friend of mine took when we went hiking, and I wrote up words about how I was feeling at that point in time, and I shared them on Instagram. So this next part of the video here is going to show you how I copy and paste from Instagram, and then also it's going to show you a couple different ideas for dealing with journaling when you save it on Instagram, what you can do, talking a little bit about Photoshop. Let's go ahead and just go over to my computer and talk about that first, and then we'll come back to the table and I'll talk about the different options that you have for bringing these things together. All right, we're over here at my desk, and I wanted to show you guys the simple thing that I do for documenting some of my stories. And this is whether you're starting for the first time, maybe this is a new tip for you, or if you've been doing this a long time, it might be an old tip. One of the things that I like to do though is use Instagram as a holding place for my stories. And in case you didn't know, you can access Instagram, your Instagram account, from a browser, which is what I'm doing here on my computer, my desktop computer, where I do the majority of my work. And this is the photo that I want to use, and this is the story that I want to tell. So this was from back in January, and I wrote up just a big thing about how I was feeling at that time. And this is a story that I would like to record. So sometimes I use Instagram just as a holding place to hold these kinds of stories. And what I can do now is I can come on here and I can literally click and copy and paste my writing there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on, I'm on an Apple, so I'm going to click Command C. You can also probably, you can just right click on, select it all and then right click and hit copy. And then I know that I want to use that photo as well. So from that point, I can go in and I can print out my photo. I can print my journaling if I want to on journal cards, or other things that I've done in the past is I just look at my phone and I rewrite this story that I had shared on Instagram, and I rewrite that on a journal card. So that is something that you can also do. So the next step in my personal process when I am doing a larger page, or in this case, I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can do it. I'm just using iPhoto now, and I've kind of started organizing things over here. I'll probably do a video about this later on. I guess they're calling it, they just call it photos now. But I'm just going to grab one of the pictures. I'm going to drag it over onto my desktop first. One of the things that I've learned is that you need to drag it to over onto the desktop first before dragging it into Photoshop. So I take it over here and then I'm going to open it in Photoshop. You can also print directly from iPhoto or from Photos here. That's another option, but I actually want to add that journaling that I just copied from Instagram, and I want to put it directly onto this photo that I want to print. So this is going to be my photo enlargement. All right, so my point in showing this too is I want to just give you a quick example of one of the ways that I would work with something like this that's beyond just using the pockets, right? So one option for getting started is using pockets. You can print your photos in simple sizes. That's an easy and approachable way to do it. And then the next step is kind of doing something like this. So I'm going to walk you through how this is done in Photoshop. It would be similar if you're using Photoshop Elements. The first thing that I'm going to do is change the size. I want to print this as a full page photo that's going to go in my 9x12 album. So along the top, I'm putting in 9 inches by 12 inches. And then I'm going to have that be at 300 pixels per inch. That's the resolution. And you want to have it up that high for anything that you're printing out. Otherwise, it's going to get blurry and pixelated and look funny. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. One of the things that's great is you can see the guides on there. I don't necessarily feel like I have to have the sunshine in there, but I do want to have, I like that I am aligned in this quadrant over here, and that gives me those, this gives me the guides to be able to do that. Obviously I'm using the crop tool here. I'm going to hit enter. And now I have a cropped image that is 9 inches by 12 inches, and I'm seeing the rulers there. Now, for the case of this photo, I like to make a couple adjustments to the color before I add my journaling on top. And, you know, there's a couple different places where I'll be able to add my journaling on there, but let's talk about the color first. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can play with color in Photoshop. There's like a million different things that you could do, and I'm just going to show you a couple of things that I do. Sometimes when I have one like this where you can tell that the color is pretty muted, I will do an auto color just to see like what happens. And so what that did is it made it a lot redder or warmer. A lot of times I will adjust the level. So this is it's back to the regular one. Let's do levels and see what that does. Levels here is often going to increase the brightness of it, so we can increase that a little bit. I'm just going to click OK, and you can see that I just moved this. This is called a histogram here, and I just moved it a little bit over that way, and that brightened it up a little bit. Let's go to brightness and contrast, which is another way. Obviously, I'm going to go really just there would wash everything out, which we don't want. But let's go back up to that again. Let's increase the contrast a little bit so that it's not, see how when you decrease the contrast, it becomes more muted. We want to increase it a little bit. Let's go about right there. And then I want to add in a little bit of red or yellow, just a little bit there, and you can just slide around and play with these, and actually a little bit of yellow just to make it less blue. It was pretty blue there, and so much of this is going to be personal preference. The other thing that I like to adjust here, whoops, is not that one, is the curves. And this is not, I don't know if curves might now be available in Photoshop Elements, but I'm just going to adjust this a little bit more. Again, this is all personal preference of what I like it to look like. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to add my journaling on here, because what I'm going to do, this is essentially a hybrid page, right? I am taking a photo from my photo library. I'm opening it in Photoshop. I'm going to add my journaling on top, and then I'm going to take it over to my table, and I'm going to add some sort of physical embellishments on top. This is a, once you try this out, or once you become more comfortable with this process, this is really actually a quick and easy way to create scrapbook layouts, right? Is by using the tools on your computer or on your iPad or even on your phone to be able to do something like this. And you can use a variety of different apps for that. I'm just showing you how I've done it for years and years. And then you'll see this on my table as well. So I grab the text tool. I want to try a couple different things. So first of all, let's come up here and we're going to draw a text box there. And then you can see that I already had some font and setup in there from a previous project that I was working on. So I'm going to hit Command V, which is print. And so now I have the text that I copied from Instagram over here in Photoshop. And I want to Command A on a Mac, or Control A, so that I can grab all of that text, because this is obviously way too big for what I want it to be for this. So I'm looking in the properties tab here, and I want to change this. Let's go with one of my favorites, which is Remington Noiseless. And you can see some of some of this font won't translate, so I have to remember to go back in there. I'm clicking Command A again to grab all of that. I want to make this like 11 points. And obviously this right here is the space between the lines. That is way too high. So we need to bring that back to a lot lower. And you can see here that this is a pretty long story relative to everything else. Let's see, let's put that on here. Longer than could probably fit on a 3x4 card. And so that's something to take into consideration. I know I probably want to do, I gotta think about this for a second. So 11 point, this is the spacing between the actual words or the actual words themselves. Let's come in a little bit closer here. And that is, I don't want that. That's too spaced out for me. So let's come back to 0, and that resets it to the regular amount. I also don't want it center justified, so I'm going to come up here and change that justification. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change these to ampersands instead of in my original one, they were plus signs. Sometimes I like to use plus signs, and this Remington Noiseless font does not use plus sign. So I'm just clicking to adjust these. I think you could probably do some kind of find and replace. That's not something that I use very often. So let's see, we're just gonna add this on here. Let's see, did I get all of them? I often miss a couple, but I think I got most of them. So let's, whoops, I'm trying to use this tool, holding down the Option key to come back out. All right, so this is a great example of where I'm taking a photo, and if I leave myself some space, I'm moving this around using the Move tool in Photoshop, I can add some embellishments across the top, which I think is what I will do for this one. There's lots of other things that you can do in terms of using, digital products. You could do a digital title. It could just be, that could be what this story is, or how you tell this story, right? It doesn't have to have a lot of extra embellishments or other things, but it can if you want it to. And I'm just changing the leading a little bit to lengthen that out. And I'm just going to leave that on there, and I am going to go ahead and print that out here using my home printer. Sometimes with this font, I find that 11 is almost too big. So we'll see when I print it out what it actually turns out looking like, and then I'll meet you guys back at my table. Also, I figured I would show you guys just printing wise here. I'm hitting, let's see, let's go to File, Print, or Command P is the other way that you can do this. And I wanted you to see, so right now I changed this to be the Epson XP 15000 printer, which is the main printer that I use, especially for oversized things. I'm clicking the print settings button so I can select the paper size, which I am going to be using the Super A or B to create the 9x12. Actually, I could use 11x17, but I don't think I have that in photo paper. I'm going to select the borderless option. It's already auto glossy or photo glossy paper. Auto select. I'm going to select the rear tray for this one because that's the place where I want to put in my this much larger sheet of photo paper. And then I'm going to click save, and then it gives me a preview of what it's going to look like on that 13x19 photo paper. And then I'm just going to go ahead and select print. All right, another option if you are looking to go the very simple route, and which is great for getting started. Let's use the same photo as an example again. This is the one that you saw me adjust. And let's say I want to print this just as a 4x6 photo because I want to use the 6x8 album, and I just want to keep things in that 4x6 size. So let me show you what you can do for that. I'm going to just do this in Photos. So in Photos, you can actually make photo adjustments here. You can make things brighter, you can adjust the contrast, a lot of those same things that you can change in Photoshop, you can also change here. So let's just say I'm like, okay, that feels good. I want to crop this one, and I want to crop it to a custom. I'm going to go ahead and click a custom amount. So we're going to put in 6 by 4, actually, and we want to click that guy there. Let's see, go back in here. There we go. So that has cropped my image to a 4 by 6. Still giving me the skyline. You know, it took out the bright sun on the bottom, and it took out a lot of the extra land here along the bottom as well. So this is going to work great for what I want to do. So I'm going to click done within Photos, and then I'm going to go ahead and print. So I just clicked Command P. This gives me the option to print on my Epson. I want to do, I actually want to have a white border on this one. So I'm going to click the non-borderless option. So borderless is going to take it all the way to the edge. And then if you just click 4 by 6, it's going to give you a border. And there's some other options that you can select here. I'm just selecting 4 by 6 just so that it makes it all the same size there. And then I'm going to hit print and go ahead and print that here on my smaller Epson. One other thing I wanted to show you guys in this video was just a quick way to use our digital journal cards. And one of the things most of the products that we offer include digital options. And so this is where it's great if you are wanting to copy and paste your journaling. That's a really easy way to do this. And so I want to show you, this is the Stories by the Year kit, the digital version of that. And I'm going to use one of these journal cards here that was, I'm just kind of going through them. Was it the Love of the Story? It was a different one, Moments and Memories. I want to use this one, so I'm going to drag that down to Photoshop, and I'm going to open it up in here. And what I want to do again is copy and paste my journaling, and let's see if I can fit all of that on there. I'm not sure. Actually, I need to go back in and recopy that. So let's grab it off of here, selecting, copying, and then I'm going to draw a box with a text box with the type tool over there. Click V. Let's see how much I'm selecting all of it. Let's see how small would I have to make it to fit on there. Let's see, let's change this to like a 10 point. Okay, so I can fit this all in here. So I want to show you guys, I want to print this out so you can see what it looks like in the album itself, and then I'll show some other ways that you can do that. So let's see if we can fit it. So we can actually fit it at 10, which would be great. It's a little tight in terms of the leading, like the space between there is a little tight. And I'd probably, let's see if we did like 9.5, which is small. Again, keep this in mind. So 9.5, but if I do that, I can change the leading a little bit, and that's going to give me a little more space there. And it's a little more spread out, and so probably a little easier to read as well. So we're just going to move that up just a little bit. We can move it over. Stuff like this. You can also do things where you could delete this portion of the journal card. I mean, this gets into way more hybrid sort of stuff, and we do have a class that shows you all of these things as well. It's called Hybrid. But you could paint over the top of it. You could draw a little white box. I'm going to leave it on there, but there's lots of ways that you can adjust things on the digital projects. Again, Hybrid is where you would want to go to learn more about that. So I'm going to go ahead and print this out. Again, I'm going to just print it on my 4x6 little printer here. I need to hit the print settings so we get back. In this case, I am going to hit the borderless option. I'm going to click save. I obviously need to change the orientation, but this should print full size. Sometimes with these, you might want to make little adjustments here. I'm going to print it out. We're going to see what it ends up looking like, but sometimes it ends up going a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and hit print, and we'll see what happens. All right, so now you've seen how I do photo enlargements in Photoshop. You've seen me add text to my photos in Photoshop. Again, that's kind of like the next level of stuff. And I'm showing it to you just so you can see what the possibilities are, but that might be way too much for you. And if that's so, I'm a huge advocate of know yourself, know what makes sense for you. And so if what makes sense for you right now is 4x6 photos with journal cards, 3x4 size, sized 4x6 size, let's talk specifically about that. So one of the simplest and easiest things to do is simply print your photos at 4x6 and then use 4x6 journal cards. So let's just start from that super simple basic spot. I think, you know, when you say scrapbooking, people have specific images in their mind of what that looks like. Maybe it's that you're dealing with a 12x12 page. Maybe it's that you're using a lot of products. Excuse me, maybe that it's really cutesy or those sorts of things. And scrapbooking can be so many different kinds of things. And what I want to encourage you guys to do is find the simplest option for you that actually allows you to get your stories told, right? To keep your memories. That's the point of all of this. So in this case, you can literally print out your 4x6 photo. You can take your journaling. You guys saw me do this in Photoshop where I added my words directly onto the digital card, but that card is also here in the physical kit. Let's grab it. Here's this one. So if you didn't want to type your journaling, you can always literally just grab a pen. Let me grab one of my pens over here. So one of the easiest ways to do this is simply grabbing a pen, grabbing a journal card, and writing your story right onto the journal card, all right? If you wanna do it, you wanna go more, you wanna be able to copy and paste, you can step up to that next level, right? You can use Photoshop. You can actually do that same thing that you saw me do in Photoshop. You can do that in Pages. You can do that in Microsoft Word. You just treat the digital PNG card as an image and you can insert that into your document and then you can add text on top. So that's always available as an option. But if you want to keep it super, super simple, a pen and a journaling card, writing out your story. Now, you got to get over your handwriting if that's an issue for you. I totally encourage you to let that go. In the future, people will love the fact that they can see your handwriting. And handwriting just in and of itself is kind of a dying art in many ways because we are so digital and because we are so tech focused in so many ways. But I can tell you that one of the things that I've learned over the years is that when I type up a story, I tell a different kind of story than if I'm handwriting with a pen. And often my stories, when I type them, they tend to be longer. They tend to be more fleshed out where I'm able to add more information to them, partly because I can edit, right? I can go back and forth, I can kind of think it through. Whereas when I choose to write by hand on a journal card or even on a specific layout, it is often more stream of conscious. It will be shorter generally. I might not tell all of the story, which is totally fine, right? That is totally fine. What I want you to see in this video, if you are just starting out or if you're coming back or if you're watching this as a seasoned scrapbooker, there are a million different ways that you can do this. And sometimes I feel like using a pen. Sometimes I feel like typing up my journaling and sticking it in a pocket. And even for me now, sometimes this feels like the perfect amount to do. This is the kind of scrapbook page that I want to do. And maybe I just want to add one embellishment onto that top photo. So this is one option, right, of doing this kind of thing. And then putting it in an album, have a home for these kinds of stories. And then you can decide how often do you want to tell stories. You know, you might get super into it and you might do a ton this month and then you might do, you know, one next month, and that's totally okay too. I think sometimes people feel like once you get started, then you have to do all of the things all of the time, which just isn't really necessary or doable for most people. So that's the first way that I wanted to show you. Again, this is from the our Stories by the Year kit, lots of options, and these come in multiples. So if you loved this card, there's gonna be more than one of this card in there. I just happen to have one of each design. Same with the 3x4 cards, they come in multiples. So other options here with it, like here's another example with the pockets here where you could just take, this one has 3 pockets, it's got a 4x6 on the bottom, and then maybe I want to use the thankful card and I'm going to just write on here, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for this, do it in a list, that's super easy, just number 1 bullet point. Number one, I'm thankful for. Number two, I'm thankful for. And then you can use one of these other cards, like we have what we call these sentiment cards often. You know, they are cards that don't have space for journaling, but it could be love this so much. And then you can just slip this inside of here. This is also a scrapbook, right? It's a scrapbook page. It is, I'm gonna write a story on there. I might add another embellishment on here, or I might not. So this kit in particular is great for somebody that's just getting started, that wants access to a bunch of cards that are generic in the sense of they can hold all kinds of different stories. So just some things for you to think about as you are considering the kinds of stories that you want to tell. Again, there isn't a value related to these, whether or not you do it this way, super simple, slipping things in the pockets, or whether you take it to the next level. The next level doesn't mean it's better. The next level is just another option, right? Another way for you to approach storytelling. So let's move on from this in the 6x8 album, and let's talk about another way that you can do it. So in that Photoshop video, or in the video where you see me at my computer, what I did was I took the photo, I made a couple of adjustments on it in Photoshop. I also added my text directly on there, and you saw me copy it and paste it from Instagram directly into Photoshop. And you can copy it and paste it into a variety of different programs to be able to get your journaling, right? So using Instagram as a holding place for our stories, and then when it comes time to scrapbook them, then you have access to that content. So in this case, again, I printed it on 13x19 photo paper. I use Epson 13x19 photo paper. I'm gonna just lay this on here and trim it off. So one of the things that I love to do in memory keeping is have full page photo backgrounds. And if you are just starting out, this might sound crazy or look crazy. You can always upload photos like this. If you don't want to print at home, you can upload 9x12, 12x12, 8.5x11, whatever 6x8, whatever full page photo size you might want to do. You can upload those to a company like Persnickety or another local developer. Persnickety Prints is someone that we often recommend. They're very familiar with scrapbookers. They're based in Utah, I believe, and I believe they ship globally, and they run some really good specials too. So if you're wanting to print a bunch of photos at one time, that's a great place to begin. So with a 9x12 full page photo. So again, I'm gonna use this linen album to hold stories from 2021. That's what I've decided to do. And in this case, something like this, the 9x12 is actually gonna go right into a page protector. So even when I do some of these like this, they can fit right in there. Now, in this case, another thing that I want you to notice is that I started with story, right? I started with my photo, I started with my words, and then at this point in the process, I'm bringing it over to my table and I can add additional embellishments. And that's the same with the 6x8. With that 4x6 photo, I could add things onto my photo, some embellishments, some stickers if I wanted to. For me, that's almost always the next step in the process, right? I start with my words and my photos first. So if you want something super simple and very photo heavy, you could do all of your pages could essentially look like this, right? In this 9x12 size, you can get the 9x12 full-size page protectors. You can do spreads. There's all kinds of other things that you can do. And if this is your first time, again, bear with me, this is the beginning of some really beautiful things. But in this case, I do want to add some embellishments on here. So before I slip it into the album, what I want to do is I'm going to dive into looking at some of my embellishments and see if I have some that make sense to support this story. Obviously, I'm starting with the full page photo foundation, so my focus on this page in particular isn't how do I add as many embellishments as possible. I just want to pick a few that are going to support this story that I'm telling about moving into 2021. So when I reach for embellishments, a lot of times I'm reaching for things that are over here in one of my drawers. Sometimes I'm reaching for something that might be out here on my desk. One of the things that I was just thinking of is like our Stories by the Month kit for January. I was gonna pull that one out and let's see if there was something in this one that would work on here. Stories by the Month is the monthly subscription that we have that is geared towards the calendar year, I would say. It's probably the best way to think about that. It's not, our story kits are like word specific, you know, like Action was the last story kit if you're watching this in real time. But these kits are more based on the calendar year. So I do have, so the embellishments that were included in this one, there's some chipboard pieces. There are, again, the cards, there's 4x6 and 3x4 cards. So I could have used one of these for my journaling, or I've got the January looks like this. Obviously, this is a kind of card that you can take. You could add little photos right on here and slip that in the pocket, and that's a scrapbook page, right? It doesn't, again, thinking about different ways that you can use the products as jumping off points for your storytelling is really the way that I try to approach designing the projects or designing the products, as well as utilizing them myself. So in this case, the Stories by the Month kit also comes with stamps too, but I'm kind of thinking about, you know, what our new year bringing on. This is kind of what I'm talking about a little bit in here. Or maybe it can be something like New Year, bring it on, fresh start, celebrate today. Like I can have these together, use them together just as a title, or I could use just one of them, New Year, New Story, January Stories, or I can use one of the other things, Loving This Story. I'm just gonna push these out and kind of see. This might be just even Loving This Story, maybe one that would work really well for this. Now, again, remembering that when I placed this, placed my journaling on top of here, I knew that I wanted the potential to add some sort of embellishment on top. I didn't pre-plan that. I didn't know what embellishments I was going to use when I actually brought it over to my table. I just know that I have a lot of embellishments that would work in that size. Let's see, and maybe even this one, because what I'm talking about in my journaling here is I'm saying continuing to show up in this life as my imperfect self, waking early most days for time and space and quiet, taking extended walks with friends on the phone as we attempt to understand the state of our country. So I'm talking a little bit about current events. In here, I'm talking about cheering on our kids as they navigate their own right now stories, enjoying yoga, following through on discussions that have been in process for me to take a step back from social media. It was just kind of a lot of thoughts and feelings related to starting out the year, and it was kind of midway through the year, but I kind of like this one too, you know, where it could even just be sitting right there on the top. And if I wanted to, I could add additional things down below, could be centered. These are all choices that you get to make, right? We get to make these choices. And part of what I want you to see, the difference between that and what we did in the 6x8, let's pull that back out from over here. You know, with the 6x8, I'm not having to think about placement as much, right? Some of those decisions are already made for me because of the size of this album. So 4x6, I could put Fresh Start on there, right? That would be a good one. Any of these, the same ones that I'm looking at for that one, could be added directly onto, I would put it on my photo, and that would go then inside just like that. So my choices are less when I'm working in the smaller size, and especially when I'm working in sizes that are already dictated to me. So when you come to a larger page, or a, you know, where maybe you're starting with a fresh piece of cardstock and you're gonna play around with the placement, it offers you a lot more choices, which can be great, but it can also be really overwhelming. So if you're looking for a simple way to start, I really recommend starting with the 4x6 photos, 4x6 cards, 3x4 cards, just being able to slip them in the pockets and getting used to this idea of telling stories. And you continuing to show up to tell stories and writing them down and just getting yourself into that rhythm and lifestyle. And then from there you can decide, do I want to go bigger? Do I want to play more? Do I want to see what happens if I'm given the, you know, the opportunity to add lots of things to a page, right? There's so many examples out there. You can look on Pinterest, you can look on my site. If you watched my video where I was flipping through albums, like I've been doing this for so long, I have so many different ways to approach it, which can be overwhelming. And if you're overwhelmed right now, start simple. Okay, you can grow and you can build into doing these other things if you want to, and you may never want to. That might be perfectly fine for you. And if you like the pocket size, you know, you like using the 4x6, but maybe you want bigger, you can use a 9x12 album. With these albums, they come with the page protectors included in here, at least a sampling of them. But here's one that has 4x6 and 3x4 pockets in them, so you can have more, because maybe you want to tell a bigger story, or you want to include more than just one photo. I'm kind of somebody that believes, or I know that I can use one photo to tell a variety of different stories. But here's an example just on these pockets, so you can see within the 9x12 that's still an option and a simple, easy way to approach that. Okay, let's come back to this because I'm still on here. So a lot of what happens when you are working with something like this is that you have to make decisions, right? That's kind of what I've been talking about related to choices. And that can be a hard part for people, is just there's too many choices, and there's too, you know, when I'm showing you, like, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. What I want you to think for yourself is, oh, I liked that one, or that's the one I would pick, or let's go with that. Making a decision and then moving on to the next story and understanding that there's always going to be a next story, that's a big piece of this overall process too. So these ones are all options. One other thing that I was thinking about that I want to pull out right now, we also did a kit last year that was called the Ups and Downs collection. And I think there's a few things maybe still available for that, but I wanted to look at some of the embellishments, specifically these pleather rainbow thing. And that I can see right now, like for me, it's too close to the top. These are things that I think about. But these ones are, these little flowers here are super cute, and this might be a great place to use those too. Again, where I'm just adding them right onto the top there. But it could also go other places. Like maybe I decide I want to have these flowers coming down with a little rainbow and the blue skies ahead. Maybe I want this to just be over here on this side, and then I'm going to have some small little title right there on the top. So that is an option. Another thing that you can consider when you are looking at things to add onto a scrapbook page like this is you can always take the journal cards and you can cut them up. And I do that often for creating additional embellishments from some of these cards. You know, things that I might want to add on to here. These are, again, the Ups and Downs kit there. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of playing around with placement. Do I want to add some embellishments on here? Do I want to have them go across the bottom? You can also do things like using foam adhesive. I'm going to grab some of that to lift pieces back up off the back of the page there. And there are some times too where I get to this part in the process and I decide, you know what, I don't need to add an embellishment up to the top here. So maybe I'm going to go back to my computer and I'm going to print it out and I'm going to let that have a little bit more space there. You know, let it fill up that sky space, and I can adjust the spacing between the lines. And that's something that I do from time to time as well. So again, what I'm really wanting you to see here is that there are different ways that you can approach this, right? There's the super simple way, 4x6, very standard size, slip things in the pockets. You can play with the 3x4s if you want to there, or you can take it to the next level, which is playing a little bit more with different sizes, going bigger, adding in other embellishments. It really honestly depends on what you want to do for yourself. And the only way that you can decide whether or not you like something is to try it, and probably try it more than once. All right, so I did decide that I wanted to change my mind and do something different, which was I wanted to fill in that space at the top of my 9x12 with I wanted the journaling to fit more of the space, because I'm just gonna do a really simple row of these embellishments along the bottom. So knowing that I have the option to change my mind is always great. And those of you that participate in our story class or the subscribe to our story kits, these are the kinds of videos that I do in that subscription every month, where I make usually 3 projects plus a project life spread in there, and I talk about how I change my mind, and I show how I redo something or how I make a mistake, because making mistakes is part of the process. And the bigger you go with your scrapbooking, or the larger your page size, the potential for more mistakes, I think, happen. And mistakes are not, I don't even see them as a bad thing. They just stuff happens. Stuff happens with the technology, stuff happens with printers and things getting glued down, right? And all of those other kinds of things as a part of the process. So again, what I decided is that I didn't want to have an embellishment on the top up here. So I simply adjusted this in my Photoshop document. I had saved this so that I could go back in and re-edit it. And what I'm simply going to do is have this have a horizontal orientation across the bottom here, just with these little bits of flowers. I also added 2019. I don't know what year I think that I'm living in. So here's a good example of making a mistake. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to reprint it, because we're not in 2019 anymore. All right, so I went ahead, went back in, did it again. Yeah, I don't like the paper wasting, so I try to get it right the first time, generally. But obviously that doesn't always happen. I also wanted to note is, if you like the full page photo look, you can also do that in the 6x8 size. You don't have to do 12x12 or 9x12. You can have either 6x8 pages that fit inside the page protectors in the 6x8 album, or you can size them bigger and have them live outside of the page protectors. And you can see examples of that in my album video, or the overview video of the albums. So again, I'm gonna make just a simple line of embellishments here. There's lots of other things that could be done. There's always going to be lots of other things that could be done. Okay, that's one of the big things about this, and about any creative or crafty sort of thing, right? There's always, you can always take it to the next step. You could always add something more. And in this case, I'm looking for actually something that's relatively simple, but that is going bigger, and that created space for my words, and where I get to use some of the embellishments that we have offered previously. Again, remembering that if you want to go in a similar or a size like this, you can always do that, and you can always add embellishments directly onto the photo. It's figuring out what works best for you. So in this case, I am literally going to just adhere these down, these pleather pieces. Sometimes the embellishments that we create have adhesive on the back, and sometimes they don't, but I'm gonna stick this guy right there. And then for these ones, I think that I'm going to, there's lots of different things you can do. You can stitch them on if you want to use a sewing machine, or just even hand stitch them. That's an option. You can also staple them down. That would be something that you could do. And you can use rolling adhesive too, which I think is probably what I am going to do in this situation, or even a glue stick. I like to use a stapler often, because that feels more solid to me, and so I use a tiny attacher for that. Right now I'm just looking in here. You could also use brads that could go right on top, but I really like the gold stitching that is on these, and so I may just put a little bit of adhesive behind there. I could probably use these foam adhesive pieces if I wanted to. Let's see, how do those stick onto there? They're gonna feel like they're, most of the time when you have stuff that is inside of the page protectors, it's definitely more well protected. Yeah, I like using these foam adhesives because they give it even a little bit more dimension. Something like these felt flower pieces are already dimensional, and they have nice texture to them too. So if that's something that you are looking for, that's always a fun option. And then I'm just gonna lay these guys, adhere them right down, basically creating a horizontal line of embellishments. And when you do something like this, you can add other things on there, right? I could add word phrase stickers. There's always going to be something else to add. But really what I wanted to do today is to talk to those of you who might be just starting out, or you're returning for the first time and you're trying to get your footing. Again, number one, start with telling stories from today. Pick a story about yourself, pick a story about somebody in your family. How are you feeling right now? List journaling is always a really easy place to start. You know, feeling good or feeling not good, or feeling, you know, have a nice combination of facts and feelings. And then maybe just start with that 4x6 size. Print out or write down on a journal card, you know, what are 10 things that you are loving right now. Let's just use that as the prompt. This is my challenge for you today. Document 10 things that you're loving. You can just take one of a journal card. If you end up getting the Stories by the Year kit, I know there's one on here that says loving. I saw it when I was clicking through. Loving this story. Loving this story. This card could hold 10 things. Write number 1, write something you're loving right now. Write number 2, write something you're loving right now. That's going to be a super easy way. Pair that with a single 4x6 photo, or pair it with multiple photos if you want to. These are things that you can do right now. And if this feels too simple to you, then take it to the next step. Maybe go larger with your photos, or maybe use a background piece of cardstock. Tons and tons and tons of inspiration online, on Pinterest, on my site, like I mentioned previously. We also have our creative team is working on sharing some of their getting started tips. So we'll be collecting those and having a blog post go up later in February, I believe, and also sharing in our Facebook group if you're a part of the Craft the Story Facebook group, which you're invited to join that if Facebook is somewhere where you like to hang out. So again, keeping it simple is great. Taking the next steps is awesome. And as we go along in this series, I'll share more ideas and things along the way. I just wanted to make sure that I talked about some of the really simple ways that you can get started, and then how you can grow from that place. So here's this example of, again, super simple, right? It's mainly the photo, it's mainly the words, and then it's just a few embellishments added on along the bottom, and I did make sure that I included the date. So this will just be, this is like story number 1 in my story album for 2019, which I assume I will be using more here as we share more ideas and things to think about related to scrapbooking in this Craft the Story series. If you guys are liking these videos, I would love to invite you to subscribe, and we'll see you back here again next week.